And then I asked, who would I be without a life of intensity and extremes? And she showed me the smoke from an incense. And she said that I would be like that incense, that I would waft and flow and rise above those cravings and circumstances. I was learning how to allow a process that doesn't necessitate extremes. And then she told me that I didn't need to drink the medicine the next night, but that I would meditate and spend time by the fire, trusting my own portals into this knowledge. It can be hard in the midst of so much violence, oppression, and despair to believe in a just, loving, and compassionate world. I'm also clear that if ever we need a collective hold of that possibility, it is now. Mundane Miracles with Sonya Renee Taylor is a podcast where I share stories, reflections, anecdotes, and epiphanies from my daily existence in an effort to collect evidence that life is truly loving and kind, full of intention, guiding us all toward greater love, grace, and compassion, proving that if we learn to look and listen, we will hear and see that life is indeed unfolding for our highest good. Join me as I share evidence that life is happening on purpose with radical love in service of our highest good, even when it sucks, especially when it sucks.
When I let my grief take up all the space of 1,000 oceans that were washing over me every day, I have to say, I felt joy, oh boy, I felt unexpected, unusual, surprising waves of joy.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mundane Miracles with Sonya Renee Taylor, this incredible podcast where I share stories and anecdotes and experiences of my life that help affirm for me that life is happening on purpose, in radical love, in service of our highest good, even when it sucks, especially when it sucks. I am your host, Sonya Renee Taylor, and Happy New Year. I believe we're in our first podcast episode of the new year. Welcome to 2025. It's a big year, y'all. It's a big year. Major, massive change, transformation, endings, beginnings. It's really this interesting teetering and tottering between endings and beginnings. I'm going to talk a little astrology real quick. So the North Node, which is where our evolutionary journey is going, what we are here to learn, to take in, is the North Node. And the South Node is what we are here to release. And the North Node, for the next 18 months or so, is in the sign of Pisces. And Pisces is the two fish in the zodiac, and it is the sign of completions. It is the sign of where we return to the void. What is ending and returning to the realm of the unseen or the spiritual in the way that I think of it? And how do we allow what is ready to complete to complete? And then later on this year, Saturn, the planet of work and boundaries and constrictions, moves into Aries, and also the planet Neptune that rules Pisces also moves into Aries. Where is Saturn and Neptune right now? In Pisces, in endings, and then they're going to move to Aries, which is what? The sign of beginnings, the sign of initiations, new starts, inception energy, where a thing begins. And so we're having spiritual endings, and then we are having spiritual beginnings. We are having the endings of old system structures, old ways of being are ending, and then new ways of being are beginning. We're also going to run up against boundaries, right? Like, can we begin something in these old ways? No, right? And so we're going to hit boundaries. We're going to hit barriers to beginning something unless we shift how it is that we move and work and do. It's a big time. It's a big, 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 big time. And, I thought to myself, what feels like it can honor the kind of massive energetic shifts that are moving toward us, that are both moving toward us and that we are moving toward, whether we recognize it or not. It made me remember this journey that I had. So while we were away over the holiday season, I had the gift, honor, pleasure to spend 10 days in the Amazon jungle in Ecuador in ceremony with a wisdom keeper from the Sapara people, and to be hosted by and in community with the Sapara people of the Amazon jungle in Ecuador. And it was incredible. It was so beautiful. And while sitting in ceremony, I participated in a yauna ceremony, which is a Sapara description of ayahuasca. And it's not the first time that I've sat with that medicine. And I was like, oh, right, I have shared before. Maybe 2 years ago in a Instagram live, I shared in a conversation with Adrienne Marie Brown, my homie, about my ayahuasca journey. But it makes total sense that I talk about it in the location of mundane miracles, because I learned so much in this past journey in the time with the Sapara people. Such deep, deep wisdom and guidance and information came to me. And I'm not ready to share that yet. We're not there yet. I'm still processing it and integrating it and letting it deeply, deeply seep into my bones. But it certainly hearkened me back to the incredible journey that I got to have in 2002 with this incredible plant teacher, healer, and medicine known as ayahuasca, or in the case of the medicine that I did, Yagé. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that wild journey, because wild it was. So, August of 2022. As I have mentioned in other episodes, after I was unceremoniously, energetically ejected from Aotearoa, I found myself back in the States, and then found myself taken on this massive journey that ended up being, many countries over several months, and deeply altering in many ways. But the second leg of my journey was Costa Rica. And I think the thing to note about much of my journeys during that time is I thought I was going someplace for, a certain amount of time. And then life was like, that's so cute. That's what you thought. And I ended up being in places way longer. The journey ended up taking on a life of its own, and my job was to surrender and allow it to unfold. And so I was in Costa Rica. I had started off in Monteverde in the cloud forests, and then traveled to La Fortuna and spent time there at the base of the Arenal volcano. And I was doing all kinds of stuff. I was zip lining across the rainforest trees, and I was whitewater rafting, and I was living my best adventure life. This leg of the trip was supposed to be my eco adventure leg of the trip. And so I was like, great, I'm going to do all these things. And I had no intentions on doing ayahuasca. Now, several people had asked me if I was going to, do a plant medicine ceremony while I was traveling. And I think maybe because many of my locations were in South America. And I was like, no. No intentions whatsoever of doing any such thing. I, as I have shared, I come from a background of a family of substance abuse and addiction issues, and anything that alters me, I've always been very leery of, to the point where, I never even drank a lot. Like I had a, 3-drink maximum. And generally it was a 2-drink maximum. And I don't enjoy being drunk. I didn't enjoy being high. I didn't like the feelings. And so I was like, no. And the only other experiences that I had had with substances, the first experience that I had with substances was an invitation to do mushrooms. It was like 2011, maybe. My good sis, Maureen. I didn't even tell you. So I'm sitting in Colombia, y'all. I'm at Maureen's house in Colombia, my dear sister. And she had a friend who had chocolate mushrooms, like mushrooms turned into like little chocolate bars. And they had instructions on them. There were 3 bars. And the instruction said, take 1 to get into the music. Take 2 for the music to get into you. Take 3, what music? And we were going to the Prince concert that night. And me and my other sister, Denise, each took 1.5 of these chocolates with mushrooms in them. And mind you, I had no experience of any other substances, not marijuana, not anything else. But this was the first time, and I was like, it's chocolates, sure. And so we took these chocolates, and then we went to the Prince concert. And I want you to know that it remains one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. I mean, we're in the Oakland Coliseum. You know, there's, I don't know how many, 14,000 people it seats. I don't know how many people it seats, but it seats a lot of humans. And I noticed that all of my sensory experiences are heightened. At one point before we went into the arena, I was looking up at the stars, and the stars, they looked like they were sort of darting across the sky. And I was like, wow, okay, the stars are darting across the sky. I think maybe I'm starting to feel the effects of these chocolates. And then we were inside, and my dear friend Gia was at this concert with us at the time. And she had ordered, I'm going to tell you how it happened for me. I'm sitting there, Prince is singing one of his incredible greatest hits, and I start sniffing. I'm like, did Prince order pizzas for the stadium, for the arena? It smelled like someone had pumped in pizzas inside of the stadium. Now, what had actually happened was I looked to my left and I saw that my friend Gia had ordered garlic fries. When I tell you that I thought the entire stadium was about to get some pepperoni pizzas, that's what I thought was happening. And it absolutely had the experience of Prince playing the concert in my belly. That's what it felt like. It was magnificent. I'm sorry. Rest in power and greatness, Prince Rogers Nelson. And I'm sorry that you all will not get the chance to hear Prince play while on mushrooms. I'm really sorry. So that was my first experience with any kind of altering plant medicine. And so then I did mushrooms again because I had this great experience the first time. And so the second time I was with my ex-girlfriend. We were in our weird liminal, neither of us really knows what this is, structure of relationship. We were at her friend's house and there were like mushrooms and they put them on a peanut butter sandwich or something. And I feel like substances work one or two ways. If you're a person who doesn't usually engage in substances, either you feel them incredibly strong immediately, or it takes a very long time for your system to be like, what is this? And then operate. I am a delayed experience person. At least I was in the past with substances. And so, we're sitting there. They make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and they sprinkle the mushrooms on them. And then they cut the peanut butter and jelly sandwich into quarters. And I eat a quarter. And maybe I wait like an hour and I start to feel maybe some like body sensations, but nothing. And so I take another quarter. I don't eat the entire quarter. I take maybe 2 bites out of the second quarter. I sit there maybe 30, 40 minutes and then I start feeling something. But it still doesn't feel good. It feels weird. The energy with my former partner feels weird. And maybe this is 3 years after the Prince concert. Probably 2012, which worst year of my life, comparable only to 2020. 2020 was just a portal year. 2012 was also a portal year, but it felt like it was harder to see the light of it, much harder. Anyway, I'm sitting on the couch with her and my dog, Anastasia Duchess. For those who don't know, it just seems absurd to me to live in a world where people don't know me through Anastasia Duchess. Anastasia Duchess was my 5.5-pound Yorkshire Terrier. She was as fabulous as her name sounds. She passed away in 2020 in the Great Collapse. She's my first and most enduring teacher of radical self-love. And she is incredible. Anybody who ever met Anastasia also knows she was incredible. There's no one who you would meet and they met Anastasia and would not echo what it is that I'm sharing about her as a fabulous fucking dog. So anyway, Anastasia was there, and I'm sitting there and I feel like just loopy and weird, and my body feels weird, and it doesn't feel good at all. It just feels strange. And I'm sitting on the couch and I see Anastasia, and she's like sniffing around on a coffee table, and I can't figure out what she's sniffing at. In my mind, there's an apple core on the table, and she's trying to get to that apple core. I say to myself, like, I should get up and move that apple core, but I'm high, so I can't really move, but I'm watching her. And then I see her sort of get the apple core and put it in her mouth. And then instantly I realize that it is not an apple core, that it's actually the remainder of the peanut butter and jelly sandwich with mushrooms on it, wrapped in a brown paper towel, that she has unraveled, and she is now eating the mushroom sandwich. My 5.5-pound Yorkshire Terrier is eating shrooms. I've never been more instantly sober and horrified in my entire life. I jump up off the couch and I'm like, no! And I go and I reach and I stick my finger down her throat. I'm trying to like make her gag up the sandwich. I managed to get some of it out of her. And then I proceed for the rest of the night to have to just sit up and pray my dog doesn't die. And I mean, talk about a really bad trip. The loud story that my use of drugs was going to cost me the life of the only thing that ever truly loved me unconditionally. As the child of a mother who was an addict, who was unable to care for me because of addiction, was by far, I was living in the full-on scope of a nightmare scenario. Luckily, Anastasia did not die. My dog absolutely tripped balls for the entire night. She just would stop and stare off into space and then just dart through the house and then come back and then stare off into space and then dart someplace else, and then she'd come back and just stare and then dart someplace else. And she did that for about 6 hours. And then I was like, yeah, I'm complete with drugs. Thanks, guys. No more drugs for me. And that doesn't even include the one time that I had some weed mango banana bread from a friend who basically gathered up all the scraps of the leftover marijuana in their house after they divorced their partner. So it was like bad divorce juju, weed bread. I ate a little bit, and then I went to a 12-step meeting because I'm foolish. And then, of course, this is like maybe 3 hours after I ate this bread, I'm in the 12-step meeting, high as a kite. It's a story for another day. Needless to say, I was like, me and plant medicines of the psychedelic nature, of the altering nature, are not in alignment. We don't need to do that. So I say all of that to say I had no intentions on doing ayahuasca. And my therapist asked me if I was doing it, and I was like, no. So I'm in Costa Rica, and I'm in La Fortuna. You know, I'm deep in my own spiritual practice, and so I wake up, I pray, I do my practice. At the time, I would do a tarot practice as a daily practice. And I kept getting these messages that I needed to step into something, like something to study. And so I got online. I can't even remember exactly what happened, but I was on YouTube, and I was watching one of the YouTubers that I used to watch who talks about spiritual awakenings. And then at the end of her video was this commercial that was like, doing a retreat, an ayahuasca retreat in Costa Rica. And the dates were literally like in 3 days. And I was like, what? And it was interesting because I was going to watch one video, and then I opted and I changed my mind and ended up watching this other video. And when I changed my mind and watched the other video, this commercial for this retreat showed up. And that's when I was like, am I supposed to go do this medicine? And I was super uncertain. I weirded out. I was like, I don't know. But ultimately, I felt like I was receiving some sort of message that was saying, yes, I should do this. So then I think on it, I go to sleep on it, I wake up. I got other signs. Things kept feeling like they were telling me, yes, Sonya, you should go explore this. So I got up and ended up looking up the location where she was doing this retreat. And I realized that it was too soon for me to go, but that they were having another retreat, maybe, I don't know, like 10 days from when I first saw this video. I just was like, okay, I guess maybe okay. I'm feeling like, yes, there were enough signs that made me feel like, yes, maybe I should do this. So I call the place. And the other thing that made me decide to do it was that it was at a center that had medical professionals on site. And I very much was of the mindset that I was like, if I'm going to do any such thing, I would only do it under the context of guided medical professionals. Like, that's the only way I've been doing this. And so I ended up calling and registering for this retreat. And I ended up getting the last spot in the retreat. And I came to realize that the way the retreat was set up is that you were there for 6 days. So let's say I arrived on a Sunday. You did medicine on a Monday, on a Tuesday, on a Wednesday, and on a Thursday. You didn't do medicine on a Friday. You left on a Saturday. So you did medicine 4 nights in a row, which is pretty intense. And basically, there were, 95 people or so who come to this place to do medicine. And I didn't know anything about it. And I didn't really know anything about that plant medicine. In retrospect, there was a way in which I was following what felt like guidance, but did not do the kind of due diligence that I think was really most important. I did watch a documentary of one of the shaman who was holding ceremony for the last 2 nights. His name is Taito Anito, and he's a pretty renowned shaman, and his lineages to the medicine. But I did not do what I would consider today my due diligence. And I think that's a really important piece of information. And one of the things that my spiritual husband, Teku, talked about before is that there's a way in which, these communities have chosen to sacrifice a certain level of sacred sovereignty of their medicines to help the world awaken. And there is an intrinsic harm done every time that we engage in this practice. That it is not without cost. It's not without risk to the cultures and communities who have stewarded these medicines over the years, that our engagement in it disrupts the ecosystem of their lives. And that there's a way in which they have said yes to that disruption for the purpose of trying to help the collective. But it feels important that we never forget that we are impacting these indigenous communities from where this medicine comes from, and that we have a responsibility in how we show up. And, like I said, I think the first time I was not nearly as aware of that as I am now. And so anyway, I go to this center and I do this medicine. And, I get there and they have a medical professional who takes your vitals beforehand. I had to take some diuretics because my blood pressure was high. And they want to make sure your blood pressure isn't too high, or else you can't take the medicine because it will increase your blood pressure. And so when you first go, the very first day, you do a meditative breathing session. I did this breath session. And in the breath session, I finished and I was euphoric. And there are 4 intentions that this center holds for you. It asks you to come with intentions on what you would like to work through in the medicine. And my intentions were that I wanted to be free of all addictive and unhealthy sexual and romantic dynamics, and that I wanted to be free of all codependent relationships. Those were my 2 intentions when I went into the medicine. And then the center itself holds 3 intentions that it just sort of asks everyone to hold in the medicine. And the first one is, show me who I've become. Merge me back with my soul at all costs. heal my heart. All right. So those are the 3 intentions that the center holds. Show me who I've become, merge me back with my soul at all costs, and heal my heart. Now, another sort of critique that I would offer now that people have pointed out to me is that there's a way in which that's a really, like, with the kind of medicine that we're doing, holding an intention like merge me back with my soul at all costs can have a really high cost. That cost can be your life. Like, when you're working in the realm of spirit, intention is really important. And there's a way in which this place where I was at, which I won't name because I'm not because I'm not interested in pushing people there, and also because, I don't need no liable suits or anything like that. I'm not trying to badmouth them. I just want to share my experience. But that the center definitely felt like it was deeply steeped in a lot of spiritual bypassing. It did not do, from my perspective, a good job of honoring and naming the lineages from whence the practices it was engaging in came from. Even though the ceremonies were led by Indigenous people, some at least were led by Indigenous people or people trained in the medicine, there was no real discussion of the cultures whose medicines we were a part of and how we might give back to those cultures. There was a lot of iconography from other cultural, spiritual practices with no information or education about where they came from or what they mean or the people that are attached to them. Yeah, it felt like very white, Western, privileged, spiritual bypass, spirit tourism kind of vibes. And, I felt that from day one. And I was like, well, I was spiritually directed to be here, so I guess I'm just going to have to make peace with that. And so the first night we do this breathing, and I have this incredible experience after the breath where this first intention, show me who I've become. And I was like, oh, I've become love. I could feel it. I have become love. And I was so excited. And I was like, yes, I felt really like, yeah, this is what this experience is about to be. It's just going to show me all the ways in which I am love. And I felt really good. Like, wow, I've grown so much that this is what I can be experiencing right now. So first night of the medicine comes, and interesting thing. So the request is to do a dieta prior to your ceremonies, which is an indigenous practice of really reducing how much you eat and reducing the unnatural aspects of food, things that are ingredients, additives that are in your food. So no salt, no oil, no flavoring. It's basically like rice and beans. And at the time, actually, I wasn't eating meat, so it was rice and beans. And I was clearly being directed to shift my diet. And at the time, I was still very much struggling to conceive not eating what I wanted to eat, even as a vegan. I was just I hadn't even really fully gotten the vegan thing under my belt yet. And so they had a sort of a buffet when you get there, and, ate this huge plate of food, and my stomach hurt, but it was good or whatever. And in part, you change your diet because ayahuasca often leads to purging. It's one of the responses of it is that you can purge. And so it also reduces the level of purging if you're fasting and eating this special diet. And so first night was the breathing night. I realized I'm love. Awesome. Second night, it's medicine. I fasted for the day. We go into ceremony, and I go up and I take my first cup of medicine. And it doesn't taste terrible. It's not my experience. It was okay. I mean, I wouldn't go order it, but it wasn't horrible. And I drink my cup, and they tell you that you're going to go get your first cup, and then you wait for an hour. And then if you would like to get another cup, you can. And then after that, you can get as many cups as you want for the remainder of the time that they are serving. And ceremony is going from maybe 5 p.m. until 1 or 2 a.m. And so I take the first cup, and I feel a little I have sensations in their light, and I'm having some beautiful visuals. I see this visual of Mother Earth like carved into the side of a mountain, and she's in grass, but I can see her hair, and her face is so soft and beautiful. And I said to myself that my intention that night when I went into the medicine was show me how all of life is a manifestation of love. And I could just see like these, swirling visions, and I could see, like I said, Mother Earth and this divine feminine mother in all of these places in the natural world. And at one point I got up and I went outside and I was on a hammock, and it just was beautiful, this beautiful, very light experience. And then I decided that I wasn't having an intense enough experience. I was like, this is nice, but I feel like I could go deeper. I could have a more intense experience. So I went up and I got a second cup. And in the second cup, I started to not feel so great, and I got a headache. But what I was practicing was that every time I felt pain or discomfort, I would say, this too is a manifestation of love. And then it would go away. Just like whoosh, the pain would be gone. I would feel sensation, an itch, and I would say, this is too is a manifestation of love. And then the itch would go away. And so every time I felt any discomfort after that second cup, I would say that, and I would notice it go away. There was an altar in the center of the room, and at one point I could see what looked like a veil over the altar, protecting the altar. And then, I just felt a little, not great, but not terrible. And every once and again, I would get up and go to the bathroom, but I wasn't purging. And so that was sort of my experience the first night. Oh, I did have this beautiful realization that it was like, oh, I don't have to learn through suffering, right? It was like, what if you don't have to learn through suffering, Sonya? Like, that's why this is not such an intense experience. And I got up and I shared that. And then as soon as I stood up, I started feeling nauseous. And I asked, they had golf carts on the property, and I asked if one of the golf carts could give me a ride to my room. And as soon as I got to my room, I began to puke my brains out. It was awful. Like, I couldn't breathe because, you're just like aggressive, purging, and you can't inhale, but there's stuff coming out, and so you feel like you're going to suffocate. It was just awful. It was not a good time. And one of the things they said is that if you purge, you can ask what's in the bucket, which I thought was a fascinating thing. But I did. As I was going into my room, I asked what was in the bucket, and I heard shame and judgment. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. And so then I went to bed, and I woke up. And when I woke up, I went into my meditation in the morning, which I do every day and have been since 2020, meditating daily. Actually, I've been meditating daily since 2021, but began my meditation practice in 2020. That morning, I got up, I went into my meditation, and then it was just like I would go into my meditation and a scroll would just fall, and it would tell me everything about what had happened in the medicine the night before. And it was like, show me who I've become. I've become someone who doesn't know when she's had enough. I've become a woman who doesn't know when she's had enough. And I was like, what? I was appalled. Yeah, I was so appalled. Hold on, I'm going to pull up my notes because I want to read them directly. These are the notes that I would take every morning after the medicine to recall what I was sort of moving through. And so in ceremony 1, I said, show me who I've become. And what I heard was greedy, someone who doesn't know she has enough. And then I said, she showed me that I wasn't satisfied with one cup, even though it was mild and subtle and beautiful, that I thought I needed a bigger, more intense experience. And then I got sick on the second cup, and I vomited, and I had diarrhea, and I purged up shame and judgment for the scarcity beliefs that still lurk in my own shadows. I was given my intention of seeing all of life as a manifestation of divine love. I was able to feel healing over everything that I felt that I responded to with this too is love. Mama Ayahuasca was incredibly gentle with me. She showed me healing can be gentle. I saw this covering over the altar. I saw her face several times in a mountain as moss and shadows, and I also saw code. So that was night 1 ceremony. But this revelation of I've become someone who doesn't know when she has enough was wild, right? And so intense. So ceremony 2, I go into ceremony 2, and I was like, okay, well, you don't have to tell me twice. I'm just having 1 cup. You don't have to hurt me. So you ain't got to yell at me. So that night I went in and I had the intention of, I surrendered to the care of Mama Ayahuasca. That's what I went into the ceremony with that night. And they called us up. I had 1 cup. Right as I went into ceremony, I also had a Journey of Love Oracle deck card. And I would pull a card. And that night I pulled a card called the Dedication to the Small. And I could see how I had come to believe that I needed these big, intense experiences to value healing, right? And that actually I was being invited into the small, gentle, everyday ways in which healing can occur. And that I was being invited to honor the small ways of transformation. And so I took this cup, and by the time the 2nd cup was offered, I was feeling really sick. Like sick, like just nauseous, sick, ill. And I stayed sick the whole night. And I really wanted, I don't know if you've ever had the experience of purging and then you feel better after you purge. And so I was like, oh, please, I just would like to purge. And it was not happening. It was awful. I just was so sick. And I remember being so angry because I was like, I surrendered to your care and I'm sick. The whole night I'm just sick. And at one point I asked one of the women supporting us in the space where we were doing the ceremony. It was called the Maloka. And she was supporting us in the Maloka, and I called her over and I said, I don't feel well. I don't feel well. I just want to throw up. And she said, oh, there. It's not time. And I was so angry. I was so angry at this woman. I wanted to wring her neck, but I couldn't even lift my head. And basically, I ended up being in the Maloka until 2 o'clock in the morning. I was so sick that after they had wrapped up the ceremony and people shared back, and I could barely move. And so then I got up and I was told that it was time to leave the Maloka. And that's when I got up and left. And so I'll read the rest of this. And so I said, I remained sick for the entire night, but I never vomited. And I had diarrhea. Sorry, y'all. We're going to talk about diarrhea and vomit in this episode. There you go. And I had diarrhea twice. And all of my feelings of not being cared for came up. And then I was told to leave the Maloka. Mama Ayahuasca told me to leave the Maloka. And as I was leaving, I overheard men planning some sort of coup because the 2nd night, only women shamans held the ceremony. And the women shamans, stopped serving the medicine whenever they decided to stop serving the medicine. And so as I was leaving the Maloka, I heard these white men planning what seemed like some sort of coup because they were mad that these women shamans had closed the bar. And I remember stumbling out of the Maloka, nauseous as hell and enraged. Are you serious? Even in the middle of this, white men are engaged in patriarchy and domination. Even here, I remember being so mad. And then I went back and I got into my bed and I closed my eyes and I could see a visualization of my rage. It was black and red and white and jagged. It almost looked like really jagged mountain ranges of these black and red and white colors. And then I saw myself shaming and yelling at these men in the daily session the next day. And then I saw some other images. And then I went to sleep. And when I woke up, I felt better. And at that moment when I woke up and I felt better, I typed, I suppose being allowed to feel everything there is to feel is also care. And I survived and I feel better, and that too is care. And I'm still processing. And so that's what it was. And then, of course, I went into my meditation as I do every day. And immediately, like a scroll, in the meditation, it came to me. Remember, the 2nd night's intention is merge me back with my soul at all costs. And it came to me that my body has overrun my soul, that I have been enslaved to its desires, seeking to escape its unenjoyable experiences and sensations. And to be merged back with my soul is to return my body and soul back to divine collaboration and balance. It is to have my body know that it can trust my soul to care for it, that it can survive unpleasant and sometimes painful experiences as my soul always knows its highest good, and that I had to experience bodily discomfort all night so that the body could realize that it doesn't always get what it wants. The soul knows things the body cannot. The soul knows things the body doesn't about its healing and can be trusted to carry us through difficult times. That my body and soul are divine collaborators led by my soul. And then this question in my meditation came up, and it said, who am I without intensity as a marker for my life? All right, so it's ceremony 3, right, of 4 nights of ceremony. And this final night, the last 2 nights are being hosted by this shaman, Taita Juanito, and he serves what they call Yagé, which is this particularly potent batch of medicine. I go in that night. I'm committed to 1 cup chuck at this point. I don't need more than 1 cup. And I'm going to go in, and I, again, set my intention to be, I surrender to the care of Grandmother Yagé. So they say that ayahuasca is the mother, the divine feminine mother, and that Yagé is the grandmother, is the way that they talked about it at this retreat. I go in that last night, and I take 1 cup given to me by Taita Juanito, and I pretty quickly started feeling nauseous. My mantra for the evening and the intention was, I surrender myself to the care of Grandmother Yagé. I trust you, Grandmother Yagé. And as I committed, and as I said my mantra and committed to the care of Grandmother Yagé, I fell asleep. And then when I woke up, I no longer felt ill. And then I began to get what they call visitations. The voice of a grandmother who was not my grandmother. I could tell it was not my grandmother. My grandmother passed in 2019. This voice was a grandmother, but it was not my grandmother. And she began to talk to me throughout the night. And so she would give me instructions. She would say, it's time to go to the bathroom. And physically, I didn't feel like I had to go to the bathroom. But she would say, it's time to go to the bathroom. And so then I would get up and go to the bathroom. And then, of course, I'd sit down and I'd have diarrhea. But I was being told before I had to have the bodily discomfort of what was happening. I was just being given the information. So I didn't have to suffer through bodily discomfort because I was just being told, here's what's going to happen, go. And so when I went to the bathroom the first time, I said, I don't have to go to the bathroom. And she said, patience, child. And I sat there and I said, okay. And then I went to the bathroom. And I remember feeling such incredible gratitude. I had such gratitude that I didn't have to suffer, like that my body didn't have to feel discomfort, that I was just being guided to what was next. And I just found myself saying, thank you, Grandmother Yagé. Thank you, Grandmother Yagé. And then she would tell me that I would need to go and lay down again. And she would say, it's time to lay down again, my child. And then I would go back and lay down. And then maybe I'd drift off to sleep. And then she would wake me up again. And the second time she woke me up, she said, this time take your bucket, because we all had buckets. And I took my bucket. Now, I didn't feel ill, but she said, you're going to purge now. And then I purged. And it was just this beautiful experience of being so cared for, that my body, this body that the night before I was being told had to feel discomfort so that it could realize it was not in charge. The next night it was like, it doesn't have to feel any discomfort because I'm taken care of. Like, you don't have to wait on a bodily sensation. I'm just going to tell you what's happening next. It was so incredible. The other thing I noticed is that over the 3 days that I was in the ceremony, I never purged with the group. There were 90 people here or something like that. I never purged with any of the other people. I always only purged in private. And part of what I was being shown was that my process was not the process of the collective, that my process was to trust my own knowing and guidance, that I am to learn to trust my own knowing and guidance, and that it doesn't have to be a process of intensity. And then she told me that I wasn't directed to go do the medicine, that I directed myself, and that I was already accessing these insights through meditation and therapy and other healing modalities, and that I had brought myself to this center because I have an attachment to external intensity. And then I asked her where this attachment to external intensity came from, and she closed my eyes and she showed me slave ships. And then she showed me visions of chattel slavery and my enslaved ancestors. And she told me that my ancestors have had such extreme and intense circumstances that they have become attached, that we have become attached to intensity. And she showed me how it was related to hypertension and its prevalence amongst Black people, and the ways in which we eat extreme foods and live in extreme circumstances, and consequently our bodies struggle to regulate because of these conditions. That we are collectively, epigenetically out of balance because of scarcity and lack, which is a condition of extremes. And that I was ancestrally wired to expect extremes. And that it was the reason that I crave salt and heat and pressure and emotional drama, as well as escape and numbness and hedonism. And then when I purged again and I asked what was in the bucket, she told me it was completion. And then I asked, who would I be without a life of intensity and extremes? And she showed me the smoke from an incense. And she said that I would be like that incense, that I would waft and flow and rise above those cravings and circumstances. And she said that I was learning patience. I was learning how to allow a process that doesn't necessitate extremes. And then she told me that I didn't need to drink the medicine the next night, but that I would meditate and spend time by the fire, trusting my own portals into this knowledge. And so then I laid on the mat, and the whole time she was just, it was such a incredible, gentle, loving, nurturing care experience. It was like laying in the lap of a grandmother. And I started to feel queasy. And then she told me to get up and go to the fire. Outside of the Maloka, there was a fire and a fire tender who keeps the fire throughout the night and smudges everyone throughout the night. And one of the things that I was told at the very beginning was that if there was something that you wanted free of, you can put it in the fire. But I was told, do not put anything in the fire that you aren't sure you want gone, because once it's in the fire, it's gone. And so I had not gone to the fire any of the previous nights. But when I felt queasy, I was like, I feel queasy. And she said, go to the fire. And then I said, but I don't feel well. And she said, I have a gift for you there. And so I got up and went to the fire because, I like gifts. And so I got up and I went to the fire. And when I got there, she told me to put codependency and love addiction in the fire. To this day, I still contend that this was the most miraculous experience of this medicine ceremony all the nights, the whole time I was there. One of the most profound experiences of my life is she told me to put codependency and love addiction in the fire. And I cannot language for you all what it means to have put that in the fire and to have felt it be gone. These two aspects of my personality and shapings of my trauma that I had been carrying with me since childhood and adolescence. My earliest experiences of codependency would have been when I was 9 years old, and my earliest sort of behaviors of love addiction would have been 5th grade. And I can't language what it's like to feel it just leave. It was just gone. And I can say categorically that that was, 3 years ago almost when I did that ceremony. And those behaviors don't stick anymore. It's not that they don't show up, but they have no hold. It's like throwing spaghetti at a wall. It just slides down. It was incredible. And then she showed me the smoke from the fire and said that I would be like that smoke, intense for others, but rising above intensity myself. And then I laid in the grass, and then I went back into the maloka. And then I asked again what was in the bucket because I had forgotten. And she told me it was my old self. And then I went back to sleep, and as I rested, she told me that millions would know or follow me. And then she told me that I would have a mild stroke the following year. And I said to her, I'm afraid. And she said not to be. She said it would be mild and that it would be my body releasing the stored intensity that it had built up. And she said that I would recover and live a long life. And then the rest of the night, I found myself saying, I love you. Thank you, Grandmother Yagé. I'm so grateful for you, Grandmother Yagé. And throughout the rest of the night, she would respond, you're welcome, my child, my daughter, my grandchild. I was all of them. And that was my third ceremony. And it was such an incredible, beautiful, gorgeous gift of this medicine. And that night when I went to sleep and I did my meditation the next morning, I was shown the other side of how I had been told how Blackness had adjusted to the oppression of enslavement through this expectation, this epigenetic expectation toward extremes. And then I was shown white people's adaptation. I was shown that whiteness was a response to extremes as well. It was just mitigated through homogenization. That this split in us not only happens when we experience trauma, but it happens when we traumatize, when we are agents of trauma. When we're traumatized, we spend our lives trying to fix the trauma. Our ways of being often return us to the trauma, call it to us again and again as a potential site of remedy. We repeat our traumatizing experiences. But when we're agents of trauma, we seek to distance ourselves from the trauma. We push away what we've harmed. We erase and invisibilize the harmed person. We seek to normalize the trauma such that it does not indict us. So when identity groups cause harm, they seek to distance the harm by normalizing it through sameness, disconnection, flatness. All of those are whiteness's response to its harms. And it's what makes white people feel disconnected from self and others. And just as Black people have adopted intensity and extremity as recreation of our trauma, white people have adopted homogeneity and disconnection as their response to being agents of trauma. And, agents of trauma and people who have been traumatized exist across all identity groups. And so the final night of the medicine, I just sat in the ceremony and in deep gratitude for all I had learned and experienced and seen. And it's such a gift today, nearly 3 years later from that ceremony, seeing how much of those gifts have come to pass, how much of my life is marked with significantly less intensity, and how much I no longer let my body overrun my soul and how I find care in so many different locations. And, the gift of the time was I did not have a stroke. And the end of the medicine, I asked Taito Juanito, if you're told something unpleasant or scary in the medicine, is it inevitable? And he said, no, you're being told it so you can interrupt, so that you can shift your behavior so that that doesn't have to happen. And that was what began my health journey. I went no salt and no oil vegan for a long period of time, and I began exercising. It had me actually finally get my hypertension diagnosed and get on a low-grade med and get my blood pressure under control. And it's a journey that I remain on today of learning how to care for and tend to this vessel so that I don't have to learn things the hard way. And so as I was reflecting on this journey over this holiday break, I felt such deep gratitude for the wisdom modalities that Indigenous communities have cultivated for centuries and centuries and have decided to share with the modern world so that we don't kill ourselves and them too and everything else. And that I was told that there are other ways to get this wisdom, right? That we don't actually have to extract from Indigenous communities. We actually just have to learn how to get quiet enough to listen. That we actually just have to get into a practice of our own lineages, of our own internal guidance, and begin to hear and to begin to intentionally do the work of hearing. That is going to get us there as well if we are intentional and diligent about it. If these plant medicines are a thing you are considering doing, I'm not here to say don't. I am here to say do it with intention. The second time that I sat with the medicine, I sat in the middle of the Amazon jungle with wisdom keepers from Indigenous tribes on a beach, in a tent, in as much harmonious relationship with the community from whence the medicine comes as I could be. And that was right relationship. And I wouldn't say that the first time was right relationship. And how generous this medicine is, that even when I wasn't in perfect alignment, there were still tremendous, incredible gifts for me. There are so many healing modalities. There are so many tools. And the first invitation, I believe, was the one that I already had, which was to keep doing what I was doing, to keep meditating and listening and praying and going to therapy and doing my healing work, and that I didn't need to be on the fast train to it. I just needed to be on the intentional one, and that I was going to get there anyway. And what a beautiful gift. What a beautiful gift of these Indigenous communities to have cultivated this incredible medicine over centuries and centuries and centuries, and to share it with us in the modern world. And if you feel called, my invitation to you is to be in right relationship, to wait for a good invitation. Because if you're supposed to do it, you'll be invited. And to make sure that that invitation honors and supports and gives back to the Indigenous communities who are sharing their medicine with you. And before you do that, just do your own healing work. It's not a shortcut. It's an incredibly intense and profound journey. And you do have access to the divine wisdom of the divine feminine that is represented in ayahuasca. That energy is everywhere. It's in you. And there are other ways to excavate it. And so I invite you to explore how you might do that and be in right relationship. I'm so grateful, so grateful for the profound lessons that I get to live in today that Grandmother Yagé shared with me in that last ceremony. And in honor and reverence for that gift, I remain committed to doing the work that she asked me to do, to live in balance and in harmony, and to share my gifts as I am directed. Thank you all. It's so glad to be back in the new year. I'm so excited for what is unfolding for all of us. And I'm going to still stay here, collecting evidence that life is happening on purpose with radical love in service of our highest good, even when it sucks, especially when it sucks. I hope you'll like, share, subscribe, make it a ritual, join us again. Tell 15 other people that they should be listening to Mundane Miracles. Let's make the new world by honoring the everyday miracles that are happening for each of us. I'm praying for all the places that are suffering, all the places that are on fire, all the hearts that are broken right now. I'm sending so much love. May mundane miracles unfold for you, even in the midst of your sorrows. Ashe. See you all soon.
You think you are dying, but you are being born.
Mundane Miracles with Sonya Renee Taylor is produced by Sonya Renee Taylor, edited by Dr. Shannon Weber. Our opening music is Joy and Grief by Sean and Abigail Bingson of the Bingsons. Our closing song is Dying by the Bingsons. Join us in the ritual of collecting evidence by rating, commenting, and subscribing to Mundane Miracles on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can get early access to episodes and support our radical love work by becoming a member on Patreon at patreon.com/Sonya Renee Taylor. That's patreon.com/Sonya Renee Taylor.